Last time on Sonic X.
Amy moves into an apartment in Station Square where she lives there from here on out. But Chris has completely replaced Amy's role in this version of the story, and as a result, Amy does practically nothing in this arc. It's more on the writers reminding the audience that, hey, he's still the main character here, he's still the hero we need to root for. Even though he spends the vast majority of the show absent, he is quite literally a flat character. She has decided to wait for Sonic for the rest of time, no matter how old she'll be. Will Sonic and Amy's relationship continue to blossom, or will cracks begin to show along the way? Amy's new adventure begins 6 months after the previous one, where she is seen stargazing with Tails, Cream and Cheese. A meteor zooms towards and straight past them, which then crashes and explodes nearby. Where the team goes to look for it, they find a plant-like alien creature, who we later find out to be named Cosmo, lying on the ground unconscious. When Cosmo wakes up at Cream's place, she refuses to speak, stating that she could only talk to Sonic. This was enough for Amy to lash out at the plant girl, making it clear that Sonic belongs to her and her only. This is the first instance in the series where Amy's jealousy comes into play, which also became a factor in some of the subsequent games released afterwards. This also sets the whole tone of how Amy would be portrayed throughout the season, and it's that I feel she has regressed quite a bit since the last time we saw her. And if you can't tell by the tone of my voice, I'm already not a fan of how this is playing out. Going on the contrary, I actually don't think it's inherently a bad thing that Amy gets a little jealous and short-sighted, but the problem here, in this show's case, is that it happens literally right after the episode where Sonic confessed his love to her. Even with the watered down English dub of the scene with Sonic promising to never leave her again, she wouldn't feel the need to act very confrontational over another girl possibly taking Sonic away from her, especially when the girl in question is still suffering from a traumatic awakening. This is seriously not a good way to kickstart their newly found relationship at all, which sucks, because I feel like this season's existence and even the show's popularity to an extent is partly to blame for this. As I said in the previous part, the show was originally only supposed to get 2 seasons. Sonic and Amy reuniting was originally supposed to be the scene to bookend the series as a whole. There was never going to be a season 3. However, because of the show being massively successful and popular in the US, it was inevitable that an additional season would be greenlit. Because of this, it seems like the writers just didn't exactly know where else to go with Amy, since she already had her time to shine in the previous seasons, and had her arc of winning Sonic's heart come to a close. So the only way to include her in the story without feeling like a redundant member of the cast is to bring back her obsessive nature present in the first 2 seasons. That being said, I don't actually think all of Amy's Season 3 appearances are bad by any stretch. She still does have some cute moments with Sonic here and there, and I actually do like how in some of the episodes she plays a little bit of a leadership role, which we would see later on in the games and in some of the external media. I also noticed that in situations where Sonic is forced to tag along with Amy in adventures, he no longer flinches or runs off like he used to, well, most of the time. Still, I think the fact that Sonic just accepts Amy's driven personality and affections for him is subtle enough that I find it neat. But other than that, I still wish there was more care put into Amy's love for Sonic, while also staying true to her character development as opposed to just making her jealous the very next episode or literally drugging him to get him to fall for her, but more on that episode in a bit. Amy's role in this entire season is mainly tagging along with the heroes in their long intergalactic quest to clear all the Chaos Emeralds, all in a while foiling the Meta-X's plans to extract the planet eggs and taking over the universe, saving their planets in the process. On one planet, Amy saves Sonic from a Meta-X fortress, demolishing every Meta-X army with her hammer. Even though she falls to the shark tank below, she amazes Sonic by knocking out the shark without even looking at it. On another planet, Amy, Cream, Cheese and Cosmo are separated from the group, forcing them to traverse through the jungle together. Here they run into a Meta-X ape where they get captured by him as he steals a planet egg. This sparks a battle to retrieve back the planet egg, which leads to some pretty cool set pieces of the girls working together, if I do say so myself. Surprisingly, the Amy, Cream, Cosmo trio has been portrayed quite a lot during the series, with some people claiming the trio to be the show's version of Team Rose from Sonic Heroes, and some of those same people actually think this version of Team Rose is superior to the one in the game, probably because they didn't feel comfortable with Big hanging out with a couple of little girls. While I personally disagree with that statement, I can still see why people have the sentiment. Amy's single-track mind towards Sonic actually drives Cosmo into taking matters in her own hands, in a way that I find endearing. It also relates back to how Amy plays a leadership role in these episodes, which I think works perfectly for her given her driven go-getter nature. Amy gets separated from Sonic once again in a future episode, and when she finally reunites with him, she gives him a massive bone-crushing hug that it looks like she's practically breaking his spine here. It's clearly played for laughs, and I do find the scene adorable, especially when you can see how happy Amy was after the hug, while Sonic is still catching his breath, embarrassed by her antics. When Tails and Cosmo host a party on the ship, Amy shows up in quite an extravagant and elegant dress, stunning both Sonic and Cream. Sonic in particular, completely frozen and sweating in his place, much as Amy says herself, he is too stunned for words. This is actually one of the main reasons why I even like their dynamic in the first place, because with Sonic being this cool, radical dude that doesn't ever slow down, Amy happens to be one of the very few, if not the only person, to stop him completely dead in his tracks. But then we head to the Planet of Misfortune episode, and this is where things get really weird. Basically, the heroes stop at a planet known for their fortune telling and magical love spells, where Amy spends the entire episode dragging Sonic along to forcefully cast a love spell on him. Her plan backfires at the end though, and her love spell ends up working on Tails and Cosmo instead. Did the writers seriously forget about pretty much everything that happened in the previous season? Because here we have Amy literally going back to her old ways once again, going a bit more extreme this time around, even by Sonic X Amy standards. By the way, the Sonic Wiki says that Sonic's muted line in episode 52 was that he missed Amy a lot, but from the version I've watched, I don't see that at all. Frankly, I also think this episode was out of character for Tails and Cosmo as well, as the whole love spell working on them kinda implies that none of their previous moments together mattered, while also not being permanent either, as they forget all about it in the next upcoming episodes. Not to mention that I find this scene pretty cliched if I'm being honest, especially if it's made to downplay another couple or character. But honestly, as much as I could criticize this episode for butchering Amy's characterization, as well as also just being another filler episode, I'll admit that I do like the scene of Amy getting all starry-eyed. I just always find it so fun to watch Amy being overly excited about things. And even despite my problems with the ending, I honestly find her English reaction in particular to be absolutely priceless.
Every time I come up with a way to capture Sonic's heart, he makes a last-minute getaway! This is totally unfair! That trap was set for Sonic! I wanted to get my romance rolling, and now I have to watch you two go all over each other! This is outrageous! No wonder I'm planning to fall in love!
Fast forward to the final battle where Amy assists in stopping the Mirror-X, now being fused into the final Mova form. Amy's notable role was saving Sonic from being trapped inside the watery planet. When Amy breaks through the planet's roots, she loses consciousness. That is until Sonic manages to catch her. The two continue to sink lower and lower into the planet's surface. That is until a magical sphere surrounds them, protecting and healing them in the process. This allows the couple to ascend higher above, away from the planet that was entrapping them, and out into space where they reunite with their fellow heroes. This is arguably their final moment together in the series, and I think this scene right here is the culmination of the entire journey. Despite their ups and downs, even in this season alone, they both still have massive care and appreciation for each other, and this scene portrays their strong relationship the best. After Cosmo sacrifices herself, the team are all left devastated at her loss, with Amy, Cream, and Cheese completely losing it. There's even a group shot of the heroes seen a couple of times in the season, and I have to admit, after spending the entire show getting to know the characters and seeing them grow and evolve over time, it really did make me a bit emotional when I had to say goodbye to one of them. In the final episode of the show, Amy is seen bringing sweets and other baked goods to Tails in hopes of cheering him up after his loss. After Eggman is done sending Chris away, he vows to conquer the world once again, and Amy herself vows to stop him and to protect and aid Sonic in whatever their next adventure entails. And with that, that's pretty much it with Amy's portrayal on the show. There isn't as much to explain this time round, but honestly, after how long the last video took to make, I really didn't want to make this one remotely close to that length. And for good reason, because Amy's character really wasn't a main focus in this season, so consider this the disappointing third entry in a trilogy if you must. But Amy taking a back seat this time round may very well be a double-edged sword as well. It's time for me to express what I mentioned at the start of the series. It's no surprise to everyone that most of Amy's reputation in the Sonic fandom and the general public is that she is the Sonic fangirl, and frankly, I do think her portrayal on the show was what started this mixed reception. It should be worth noting that in the games, in the past, Amy doesn't really harp on too much about Sonic. Sure, she does have her affections for him, even teasing him a little at his expense, but I would argue that Amy in Adventure 1 and 2 were mainly just a good friend of Sonic's, and there really wasn't any animosity between the two or any of the other heroes. Amy in Sonic X makes way more advances towards Sonic, since the writers seem to have put way more emphasis on romance and shipping on the show. It just kind of felt like the show was made to create ships, and shippings have since become a huge talking point in Sonic. And for the most part, her affections for Sonic on the show was mainly played for laughs, with Sonic mainly not caring, although that's pretty much due to me still being extremely mixed on Sonic's portrayal on the show. While there were some moments where he truly did care for his friends, there are a few instances where I don't think their relationship was portrayed that well, such as the stupid fucking date episode and the whole love potion crap. There are times where I just want to throw Sonic out the window, and seeing his antics being the root of Amy's constant advances certainly didn't help. This is arguably the first time in the series the Sonic franchise has tried to develop Amy's love for Sonic further than what the games at the time were doing, for better and for worse. What's also a huge factor in Amy's portrayal on the show, however, is her temper. While she did have the occasional snappy comments in some of the games prior, her aggression was pretty much non-existent, or was at the very least an extremely small part of her character. Sonic X, however, has cranked up her aggression and temper to 12, as she doesn't hesitate at all to lash out at anyone whenever she feels threatened or upset, whether that's her friends, enemies, or even towards Sonic himself. It's something that's pretty much synonymous with Amy's Sonic X portrayal and has garnered some criticism from fans and critics that found her either creepy or annoying. This is pretty much an example of how the show took something that either wasn't a thing before or was only a small part of something and just doubled down on it. It also doesn't help that the English dub has removed or has altered a lot of her best and emotional scenes, and since the English version is the one that the huge majority of people has watched, with the original Japanese version flopping in its own country, people didn't get a chance to see some of Amy's more heartfelt moments. Because of how insanely popular the show was at the time, this was also Amy's most well-known portrayal as well, as most of her antics came from this version of the character. And truth be told, the show's popularity has transitioned well into some of the games directly after. The show also came out in the same time as Sonic Heroes and Sonic Battle. Both of those games also sparked a notable shift in Amy's character. It seems like with every good thing Amy's Sonic X portrayal does, it also takes a couple of steps back as well. The early episodes are all bogged down by all of them having the same premise and plot. Amy's game adaptations, while not bad by any stretch, are just not good as the games themselves. Chris replacing Amy's role in the SA2 arc is simply inexcusable. A Day to Forget was a good concept on paper, but is ultimately let down by poor execution. Even my favourite scene ever in the Sonic franchise has been completely butchered in the English dub. While there were a couple good scenes for Amy that I liked in Season 3, I honestly felt like more should have been done to Amy's character this season, and the season actually undid a lot of the things from the previous two seasons and from what was supposed to be the final episode of the show. That being said, you might be wondering why the series is called Redeeming Amy Rose in Sonic X, if I truly believed it contributed a lot to Amy's mixed public reception at this point on. Well, even despite the negative things I've said, I can't help but love this portrayal and even the show itself anyway. The stuff I said about her temper and her affections being more forward was mainly just a comparison from her past portrayals in the games. I honestly think the show gave Amy a new layer of depth that the games prior wasn't able to do so. The show was one of the reasons why I even became a fan of the character to begin with, and I even like her interactions outside of her ones with Sonic, which even I'm surprised she has plenty of. Her sibling-like bond with Tails and Cream, her butting heads but still caring deep down relationship with Knuckles, her rivalry with Rouge, and also her relationship with Chris, who, despite maybe slandering him a couple times throughout this review, I don't recall that many moments where they clash and argue with one another, and they seem to have a pretty good and healthy relationship on the show. Many of Amy's flaws, and even the show's flaws itself, are a lot more prevalent to me now than they were when I first watched the show years ago. Something I feel a lot of people fall victim to is letting nostalgia and personal feelings towards a particular thing or being get the best of them, myself included. So acknowledging these shortcomings of what could have been done better, I feel is important fun and being able to criticize the things you love. Another reason why I decided to tackle Amy's Sonic X portrayal in particular is because of the show's impact. Even though the show was such a huge deal back in the day, it is largely inconsequential nowadays, with most of the discussion towards it only being brought up by hardcore Sonic fans, as opposed to the general public as once before. I think looking back at it, how the show and the character has changed up to this point in time was such a fun trip down memory lane, even if there are some things I heavily disagree with. I also thought that Amy's Sonic X portrayal was kind of one of those things that people draw criticism towards with barely any nuance or added thought put into it, thus being pretty easy to hate on. So making a full review of her Sonic X portrayal was my way of giving that, and even the show itself to an extent, the analysis and send-off it deserves, now that the show is already 20 years old at this time of the recording. But even though I may be done with Amy's Sonic X portrayal, I'm still not done with reviewing Amy entirely. So join me next time as I'll go through all the games she's in decade by decade. We'll be going back in time, all the way back to 1991, where it all began. I hope to see you all again very soon.